Hey there guys, Noah here. Welcome back to another Vanguard deck profile. Today we're going to be taking a look at my Luard list that I took to the Project G-Boot tournament for the month of July. If those of you who are unaware on what Project G-Boot is, they are a small Discord group that dedicates to hosting tournaments for retro formats for Cardfight Vanguard. And so I figured today I would show you guys the first place list for the month of July. I took Luard because why the hell not? And honestly, felt pretty freaking comfortable, all things considered. There were a couple close calls, not gonna lie, and my only loss in the entire tournament was against a mirror, which I don't do very good with mirrors. I can just tell you that right now. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with the deck profile. Starting off with our starter, which is the Viceroy. Viceroy is just an overall amazing starter, mostly because when you retire him due to the cost of your ability with the ritual ability attached to it, you can move him to the soul and countercharge 1. So a lot of the times you have a bunch of your different cards that have ritual associated with them, and Viceroy just helps you maintain not only soul but countercharge because you actually go through quite a bit of CB as well as soul for the deck. So yeah, that's the whole reason why we're running Viceroy as the starter. So now for the grade 3s, I ultimately decided that I was going to run 4 Dragfall and then 3 of the Dragheart Luard. Now, a lot of people, honestly, they usually cut Dragheart completely, specifically for the Dragfall, and I am strongly against it. The primary reason is simply because if you don't see Dragfall at any point, at least you have a somewhat decent backup with Dragheart. But Dragfall, you really want to go to and prioritize in most situations, because he has a really good ability that allows you to essentially cheat out a stride / ultimate stride, which is honestly pretty freaking good. And that's kind of the main reason why Luard is actually really good in the G era. And this card is still used in some variations of Luard even to today, so I think this card is actually aged pretty well. But his stride scale allows you to search for a grade 1 or lower card, call its rear, shuffle the deck, and if that unit that's called has the ritual ability, you can choose one of the opponent's rear guards and say call him as it and retire it. So having a nice retire option in addition to a search effect is really good. And then anyone who's played D-Series Standard right now knows about Dragheart Luard. So Luard allows you to pay the cost for stride by setting 2 normal units to the bottom of the deck, and then allows you to get a 2-for-1 essentially off his stride scale. So pretty good overall. Like you could honestly, if depending on the build, you could somewhat consider taking out Dragheart, but I just was not comfortable with it at all. So moving on to the grade 2s, we're going to run 4 copies of the Dragfencer Dagda. Dagda is insanely broken in this deck, especially with the way how it's built. So essentially what you allow it to do with it is when it attacks a Vanguard, whenever you attack once you're on GB1 and you have 5 grade 1s in the drop zone, i.e. Ritual 5, you can counterblast 1 and retire one of your grade 1 or less rear guards to search your deck for 2 grade 1 cards and call them to rear, and you can choose up to 2. So there are some situations where you do want to just call the 1 so that way you don't, kind of deck yourself out. But essentially, it's at most 2 bodies on the board. Again, similar to Luard's stride scale, you get a 2-for-1 off his effect, so pretty damn good in that retrospect. And then we're also running 2 copies of the Slaptail Dragon. So Slaptail is just a funny little card because while in the deck or in the drop zone, if I got a Luard Vanguard that's grade 4, he counts as a grade 1. So you can actually call him off of both of your stride skills and a myriad of different other skills. So just overall a pretty consistent body. So he counts as like a secondary grade 1 in case you want to go into him. But his other ability is very good as well, where whenever your grade 1 rearguard is placed, if you got a Vanguard with the ritual ability, that unit and this unit get plus 3k. So essentially it becomes a 12k beat stick, which is pretty nice, which you could probably pump up even further from a myriad of different other skills. So overall just a good card. And then the last grade 2 that we're running is we're actually running 2 copies of the Ganon. So Ganon is basically Skull Witch in the main, but even better. So essentially counterblast 1, ditch your card with the ritual ability that's grade 1, and then draw 2. So literally a pot of greed, specifically for the ritual engine. So honestly pretty good. You could afford to gut him if you don't feel like he's going to be useful. There's plenty of different grade 2s that you could actually consider, but those were the ones I felt like I could actually use. But also, those were the ones that I actually legitimately had access to. I essentially built off my 2018 list that I took to Springfest years back, so yeah. So moving on to the grade 1s, which is the main bread and butter of the entire deck. We're running 4 copies of Frommark. So Frommark is just an amazing card in its own right, as it allows you to filter even further thanks to its on-hand ability. When it's in hand, you could discard it and rest one of your ritual rearguards to draw 1. It doesn't have to be a grade 1 or a 0. It could be literally any card that has ritual, so that's pretty good. And then GB2 Ritual 5. If you got a grade 4 Vanguard with Luard in its card name, this unit gets plus 7k and resist. So yeah, overall just pretty damn good. Having resist already pre-built and attached to it is just nice to have. And honestly, it's pretty fucking good. But yeah, that's Frommark. Running 3 copies of the Abyssal Owl. So Abyssal Owl comes up in a lot of situations where you need the extra counter charge, because when he's retired due to the ability or cost or effect with my Luard Vanguard, you can actually counter charge 1, which is very important. But when he's placed on rear from hand, look at 7 cards by the top of the deck, search up to 1 card with Luard in its card name, reveal it, put it into the hand and shuffle the deck. And if you put a card in your hand, you have to choose cards equal to the total grade of 3 and discard them. So heavy cost for the search effect, but considering a lot of the times you're specifically searching for the specific Luard, you kind of need it. So for that reason, it's just overall good to have. And counter charging is just honestly really good. So there's that. And my tech choice of situation, these next 4 cards, which I teched in for Swordbreaker, could be legitimately anything. It could be Hanali, so that way you prevent your opponent from multi-attacking. It could be any other ritual piece that you may actually have not considered. But I decided on Swordbreaker because, 1, I actually kind of forgot Hanali was part of this format. And 2, and probably the most important thing, in those weird instances that you don't stride into a ritual card, this comes up. So when it's placed from deck, Soul Blast 1, draw 1. So yeah, just honestly really good. That's kind of the main reason why you run it. And then the other draw engine in this build is the Dragfencer Luard. So whenever it's placed on rear from deck, as long as you got Ritual active, Ritual 1 is specific, and you got a Vanguard with the Ritual ability, you could Soul Blast 1 to draw 1. So just nice. Again, that's kind of the reason why we run Swordbreaker in the first place, but that's just how it is. And then obviously we're running for Esros. Esros has still sees play to this day. Like, this card is aged just as well as Dragfall in its overall usefulness. So obviously it acts as a perfect guard, but it also has a drop zone skill where once you're in Ritual, you can select one of your rear guards and retire it, and then choose another copy of her from drop and put it to the bottom of the deck, and you can return her from hand. So essentially, you can recycle the PGs with this card. So just good all around. And then now for the trigger lineup. We are of course running our resource heals, just because honestly you kind of go through a lot of counterblast and soul blast in this deck. And then we're doing the really wonky thing. We're running 4 Aether and 4 Cursed Eye Raven. Now, Cursed Eye comes up in a lot of situations where you need to reestablish the board to retire off for different effects. Because when you activate them, you can send them to the top of the deck and shuffle. Look at the top 2 cards of the deck, call up to 2 as rest, and put the remaining cards to the bottom of the deck. Any cards that are called off its ability get killed off at the end of the turn. So a lot of the times you're going to activate Cursed Eye, call 1 to 2 cards, and then proc off a different skill to retire that card that you just called out off the Cursed Eye, to make it so that way you basically got a free body on the board, and you were able to retire it off for a different effect. And Aether comes up because not only does he count as 2 units when you retire him from a cost from an ability, but when he gets sent to the drop zone for a retire effect, you could shuffle him back in. So that's just multiple different ways to actually be able to continue your lines of play, but most importantly, it makes it so that way you can recycle your triggers, similarly to how you can recycle your Esros. And then the last triggers, obviously, we're running for Belial Owl. So Belial Owl, when he's retired due to an effect or cost of a card while I have a Luard Vanguard, draw 1. And then at the end of the turn, Ritual 3, if I got a Luard Vanguard, I can put him back to the bottom of the deck. So 12 out of the 16 triggers can recycle themselves, and that's insane. That's actually really insane value for reasons we'll get to later. but it's kind of the main reason why I opted to not run extra crits or even draw triggers in this build, because honestly, you want to see stand triggers as consistently as possible, so that way you can do multi-attacking shenanigans from them. Not as applicable in today's format in Premium, but regardless, it's still just, this was probably like best case scenario. That's how I would personally build it like back in the day. So that is it for the main deck. So let's go over the Gzone real quick, because Gzone is very self-explanatory. One, Seabreeze, because in this format, Grade 2 gaming is very important, and being able to have some sort of advantage in the Grade 2 game is also very important. So what he actually does, he's pretty outdated by today's standards, but act in Gzone, you can counterblast 2 and ditch 1 card from your hand if you got a Grade 3 Vanguard and the number of face-up cards in your Gzone is none, and your opponent's Vanguard is Grade 2 and they didn't ride another Grade 2 during the ride phase of their past turn, you could just stride this card for that cost. So a lot of the times your opponent will try to like Grade 2 game you, kind of forget that Seabreeze or take Seabreeze into consideration, and still opt to not ride another Grade 2 from head, and then sometimes you're just able to punish your opponent like this. So pretty good card all around for this format. And then our main other stride that we really go into is of course the Dragon Abyss Luard. We're running him as a full 4 of. So Dragon Abyss, pretty useful card. So you can Soul Blast 1 and G Persona Flip and retire a rear guard, and then search your deck for 2 Grade 1 cards and call them to rear. And then if both of the cards you call out have the ritual ability, you can select one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So between Dragfall's Stride skill, on top of Dragon Abyss's own skill, you're actually able to get 2 retires for basically nothing. So that's just honestly insane. And then he has Ritual Cross GB3. All of your front row units get plus 10,000 for each Grade 1, every 4 Grade 1 cards in your drop zone. So the numbers could get even crazier if your opponent is not too careful. And that's kind of the main reason why we run it in the build. So now for the situational attacks. First off, very self-explanatory once again, but 2 copies of the Phantom Blaster Diablo. Diablo, again, nowadays isn't really all that applicable, but back in the day, this card was everything. The G-Guards, I'm convinced, were made specifically because of cards like this. So, once you're on GB2, essentially, you can counterblast 1 and G Persona Flip and give him plus 10 crit and the red text skill where when he attacks a Vanguard, you can select 3 of your rear guards and retire them, and your opponent may choose 2 of their rear guards and retire them, and if they don't, they can't call anything from their hand to Gardia until the end of battle. So this card, back in the day, was super cracked because G-Guards didn't exist. So if you set up the board near perfectly, you were able to just kill your opponent and they couldn't really do a whole lot about it. So this card is still somewhat seen play, but not as much anymore. It was kind of outdated. And now for the 1-ups in the build. So 1 copy of the Dragstrider, the OG Dragstrider, obviously. So Ritual 7, you retire 2 rear guards, and then when he attacks, you can choose any number of your cards from your hand and discard them, and he gets plus 3k for each one discarded. And then if the number of cards discarded were 2 or more during this battle, he gets plus crit, plus drive, and your opponent can't call Grade 1 or greater cards from hand to Guardian. So, again, you know, just honestly nice Garter strict. You can't go wrong with it. 1 copy of the Ogma. So essentially, you can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and turn a G unit face up. Select 5 of your Grade 1 rear guards and retire them. And for each rear guard retired by this effect, your opponent has to select cards from their hand or rear guard and put it into the drop zone. If the total of rear guards that were put into the drop zone by both the effect, 3 or more, you draw 1. So, not a bad card, but it is kind of situational. And then lastly, for the situational attacks, we run Spectral Blaster Diablo. So, Spectral Blaster comes up in the situation where you need to get a restanding Vanguard, which it honestly never really came up, but it's still nice to have. And now for the G-Guards and the final stride that is very self-explanatory. So, of course, we're running 2 copies of the Plotmaker Dragon. So, Plotmaker has a very basic skill. Do you want to focus? Hello? Make fly. There we go. So, Plotmaker has the effect where Ritual 3 gets plus 10 shield. So, pretty good on that front. Just a generic shield in its own right. One copy of the Dark Veil Dragon. So Dark Veil comes up in various situations where you have a lot of Grade 1s in drop, and you can take advantage of it. Soul Blast 1, and then the shield gets +5 for every 2 Grade 1s in your drop. So pretty good overall. One copy of the Bronarch. Basically with her skill, it allows you to reveal the top 5 and place any Grade 1 cards from among them to Guardian, and then put the rest of the bottom of the deck in any order. So sometimes this is just, if you don't see enough Grade 1s, you could just go into her and kind of refuel your drop zone a bit. And then one copy of the Gelato. So this came up in my final match, but essentially what she allows you to do is flip a G-Guardia face up when she's placed, select 2 Grade 1 or less cards, move it to the Guardian circle, and then draw 1 if you moved up 2. So just getting that extra card can actually save you in the long run, and it actually kind of did for me. And then lastly, the main GOAT, the absolute GOAT of this deck, Seraph Dragon of Zenith Peak Ultima. This card is single-handedly the most broken card in the entire deck, because it's very easy to use in this build. So Counterblast 2, select 4 cards from your deck, call 2 of them, and then you place the other 2 on the top of the deck after you shuffle. So, yeah, the combined for stand triggers and critical triggers, we can guarantee, assuming we also have DRAGNOA on the board, 6 attack combo, with 2 of those attacks being massive. Actually, 3 of those attacks being massive if you include Vanguard. So just overall a very useful card in general. But that is the list. Let me know what you guys think about the list in the comment section below, and if you want me to do like more retro format kind of things. This was just kind of a one and done thing because honestly I wanted to play in a G-era tournament, and because I heard that the format was kind of just hanging around and a lot of people played it, and honestly it was fun. I really had a good time. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this. And until next time, this is Noah, and I will catch you guys later. Bye everyone.